Oh, yes. I can do it.
Well, this is what I have. This is quite right. I think you're right here in the middle.
Is Tony Weiskopf online? Sorry, is Tony Weiskopf online?
Yep, I am. Hi, Stephen.
Tony, Stephen, how are you doing?
I am good. How's it going there? Is everybody exhausted?
Here we go. We're still gathering. There's a little. It's raining in Tucson, which we don't expect this time of year. So people are taking a little while getting here, but we'll let the crowd gather for a bit.
Sounds good.
I do see some people showing up, which is good.
That's always a relief. Yes. I remember previous TBIWs that had the entire panel late because we were at dinner and we were booking to get back. So, it's Chattanooga, I think. So.
Oh, and Les is here. Hey, Les.
Just making sure the audio and video works. How are you? Are you surviving?
Oh yeah, we're doing great. There's a whole crowd here looking at you. So some of your friends are here. Some of your friends are here.
Yeah, Les and I were just texting back and forth about how we were really missing being there with you guys.
Well, you've both been really missed, and Les, many people have mentioned your work on solar sails the last couple of days, and I think you would have enjoyed some of the sessions.
Well, I know I would have, and I was texting Tony, having made me think about our first meeting that we had in Oak Ridge and how all this started, and I can't believe I missed one of the meetings.
COVID has done a number on all of us. So
it has. It sounds like it's gone really well, though.
So far it's going well. He's right there. You want to talk to him? Les, I'm handing over the mic to Louis. Here you go.
Hello, Les. Lou Friedman here.
Well, hey, Lou.
How come I could come and you couldn't?
You can drive.
No, I can't. I can't drive. I don't drive.
Did you fly?
No, I took a train.
Oh, okay.
You don't know what a train is, do you? I'll give you a lesson sometime.
Yeah. Well, I thought about driving out there, but when I realized it was 1,000 miles beyond Houston, which is 700 miles,
Yeah.
I kind of got a little shy of spending 4 days or 5 in a car just to get there, and I didn't really feel like flying. So
I could fly, but I hate it because everybody's so grumpy, and so I did do an airplane trip a few weeks ago, but I don't like it. But I took the train here.
Well, I suspect after the first of the year, I'll end up having to fall back into the business travel mode and get used to doing it again. I have to admit, though, I have not missed getting on an airplane.
Oh, it was never fun, but now it's grumpy. It's really grumpy. Just that's what the good when there's no problems, it's grumpy. And then if it's problems, that only adds to it.
Wow. So it sounds like the meeting's gone pretty well. I'm glad Stephen's holding up well.
Stephen's done a good job. Really very impressive. He's
Good.
juggled a lot of balls. And I think maybe if he does this for you again, you should give him a raise.
Yeah. We compensate our volunteers very well.
He's done a very good job. He's had to deal with a zillion things, and it's gone very well.
Good.
From the audience point of view, it's gone perfectly.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that. So, we just lit up another camera. You can probably see Dave Butler and Chris Smith there. So they're going to be on the panel. So your fellow Bain authors.
He's covered it up.
I've been watching or monitoring Dave's reactions on MeWe and social media, and I can tell, mind blown.
I was walking out of the previous plenary session, and somebody said my brain hurts. I was going, yeah, I kind of get that. There's been a lot of math. I used to be able to do that math, but I can't do that math anymore. So
I've been following Bart Leahy's posts. Bart's a great
I've been sitting
communicator.
next to Bart, and Bart has been typing frantically. I don't know what he's doing, but he's been typing a lot.
He takes a lot of notes and makes some very interesting social media posts. And I've been, whenever they pop up, I check them out because he's a lot of fun to listen to.
That's cool.
Read about anyway.
Right. Cool.
Is Chris's dad there?
Say again?
Is Christopher Smith's dad there?
Yeah. Christopher's here. Say hi. Welcome.
Oh, I see Jeff Landis. Hey, Jeff.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
Mary will be here in a moment. She's going to join on her own machine.
Hey,
Charlie,
nice
maybe
to
put
see
the,
you.
graphic
Floating
back
in space.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not there in person.
up. I'm going to encourage people to sit in this sequence. That way the audience, because this will be on screen. That was it. Yes, you do. You sit in his lap. So, you'd be-
That could be interesting, whatever that's about.
I've been passing on your dictate.
Signature, but I'm in the first. I'm not on the
Since it was given to me.
No.
Over down. It's like this big.
Yeah, well,
It's a little diver.
that end. Yeah.
Well, Jeff Landis, if the power sale NIAC proposal is selected, that'll be the first time we've had a chance to work together in 20 years.
Yeah,
yeah.
not since the very original Interstellar.
Yeah, John put together a good
Because I've been
proposal. I
telling
was
everybody
pleased to see your name on it.
Oh, okay. I'll be down here.
Okay,
All right.
wherever.
All right. I've been told I'm on this end. So
Very good to know that we're being moderated because we are immoderate individuals.
Chris, we're gonna-
I have been given these
I didn't
nameplates.
know
Now
this, so,
the
yes, I'm
challenge
on this
levels, I'm not sure which side you sign on. They both feel like paper to me. Since it, like, you feel like the back is ever so slightly more like, I think it's just sign both sides. They can figure it out.
And then we fold them in the middle. And
Yeah,
is that the-
sharing.
I mean, the
Plan.
good news is I think they got both the anthologies here, but if someone
Yes.
said, hey, Rob, I want to get, do no harm, and
Yeah.
you could be like, here you go. No.
No, you're Jim, you're here.
Yeah, you're down
Yep.
there. We have to sign
Nice
something.
try, Jim.
They don't trust us to seat ourselves.
Yeah,
No, there's a-
look at the
There's a
look at
graphic.
the graphic.
Which, oh, nice, very fancy.
Charlie, freeze it on that screen. Thanks.
There it is. There's the graphic, James.
Well,
You're in the left end.
I'm a little concerned about that. Maybe
I mean, we're not quite
Maybe we're gonna share
staggered
one.
like
This
that.
is the, we had a panel I was on at the VidCon 1 year. It was 14 panels, so 3 people.
Put them on the panel.
Yeah, no, we don't have to do front, back. So that's good. That's a very good thing. Yep.
Yeah, we should have.
We run many of the same sort of.
Yes, it is.
I think I'm even older.
No.
I am 3 years
And
old.
there's a.
Oh, wow.
You said you gave your birth.
Oh, I did, yeah.
It's in the
So
back.
I used to be the executive director of Planetary Society.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
I'm not really.
Good to
I'm
finally
not
meet you.
really an author.
I know you well, and I know you through.
Charlie,
Through reputation.
what would the audience cam look like without the incredibly bright light? Dim silhouettes, that's one thing, but that's really
All the
bright.
circles that I seem to somehow just tangentially go
We
by. that
just miss each
everybody
other.
know missed you or know you.
I'm good. Yeah.
We look okay on the screen.
So,
Now I can see you. Welcome. For how many people in the audience, this is your first part of this Interstellar workshop this weekend? How many people? A couple there, a couple there. Anybody else in the back? Welcome. Glad that you're here. My name is Stephen Fleming. I work at the University of Arizona as my day job. This is not my day job. This is a conference that moves around the country. This is the 7th time we have held it. It's the first time we've held it in Tucson. And it consists of a bunch of scientists and engineers and other interested parties who are interested in making interstellar travel happen in our lifetimes. And some of them are actually trying to build hardware to make that happen. Some of them, like some of my panelists here, are writing stories about that. So we have fiction and nonfiction on our panel. But all of us kind of share a common belief that if we just sit back and wait for interstellar travel to happen like it did on Star Trek or what have you, that we're not going to get to see it. And we want to see it. So we're working on things where we personally are probably not going to get to go, but maybe some of the ones in the back row there get to go, or certainly your kids get to go. So this is our 7th Interstellar Symposium. One of the things that we do every year is, Charlie, if we could go forward one slide. There we go. One of the things we do every year is an outreach event, which is sponsored by Bain Books. So of our 7 panelists up here, 3 of them have been published by Bain Books and 4 of them have not been yet. But the person who's about to pick up the mic would probably like to change that. So I'm going to toss this to Tony Weiskopf, publisher of Bain Books, who would normally be here, but COVID has been just kicked everybody's travel plans in the head. So Tony, if you're there, and if Charlie, if you could put her picture on screen, there she is. Tony Weiskopf, publisher of Bain. Welcome. Thank you.
It's great. It's great to see you guys and to see all of the shell-shocked, mind-blown faces on the panel. That is exactly what I want a interstellar research group meeting to be. I am publisher of Bain Books, and we've been sponsoring these meetings since the second one, when they were called the Tennessee Valley Interstellar Workshops. They've grown so beautifully, and I've had the pleasure of sending my authors to these conferences and reaping the fruit from the seeds that have been sown. And I look forward to getting the proposals from not only people that I've published before, but people I hope to publish again. Homer Hickam, I'm looking at you.
I'm here in Huntsville. You got to work with Tony.
Yeah.
You're an hour and a half from her house.
So we'll talk.
Oh, good. That'll be fantastic. Love that. But they are so stimulating to science fiction writers. And what we see as a mission for science fiction writers is to take that enthusiasm and the stimulation and the fantastic concepts and the notion that this is something that we can achieve, we humans can achieve, and turn that into stories that inspire a greater public. And that is certainly what we hope the authors will be able to do as a result of their attending this conference.
Thanks, Tony. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate the stories you publish that do inspire so many people. So thank you. We appreciate it. While we've got Zoom up, I'd like to toss the mic to Les Johnson. Les Johnson is the chair of the program committee for the Interstellar Research Group for these symposia, and has been the conference chair of this more than once in the past. So he's been involved in this since, I think, the very first one. Les Johnson is a honest to God rocket scientist at NASA. He's showing in the background there his latest project, which is a solar sail. And Les, we're really sorry you couldn't be with us. This is the first one you've missed, and I hope it's the last one you miss.
Yeah, me too. It sounds like you all have had a great weekend. I've tuned in as I could via Zoom, but it's just not the same as being in the room. In fact, I was talking to Ken Roy earlier today, early this morning, and just thinking about how much I really missed the hall talk, getting together with friends and colleagues and coming up with new ideas over lunch and all the great stuff that happens in the working tracks. So it sounds like you all have had a great event this weekend. I know you have some tours coming up, and I hope you all take great advantage of it. And thanks for inviting me to give a shout out here at the outreach event. The Interstellar Research Group has been near and dear to my heart. It was begun as a labor of love among many of the volunteers that put this on this weekend. And I think all the attendees need to be aware when they do see something that doesn't go right, and I've heard not much has gone wrong, but remember, they're all volunteers. And this is something that we all do because we're passionate about it. And whether it be from the work I do in my day job, working on solar sails, to the fiction I write for Bain with Tony, to being there with y'all, it's really important and it's meaningful. And I'm so sorry I wasn't able to be there with you.
Well, glad that you're at least here in spirit. We appreciate it. So thank you, Les. Good to see you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I see some more people trickling in. Welcome for those of you who came in late. This is our public outreach event, so thank you for being here. Charlie, if we could go to the book cover. There we go. If we did it right, we're sitting in the same sequence as those book covers. So you'll be able to identify speakers by where they're sitting. I'm not there because I don't have a book. But if we could start at the far end with Jim Benford, and maybe just give, first we'll do quick introductions, you know, who you are, what you've done, what your books are like. Just let the audience know who you are if they haven't run into you before. So Jim, you're up first.
Hi. I think the question that's put to us basically is, why are we doing this interstellar stuff? And I have a very succinct and concrete answer. It's because there was a conference in 2011 sponsored by DARPA and NASA called the 100-Year Starship as an effort to start interest in moving toward interstellar flight. And it was pretty successful because it was part of a groundswell of organizations that rose up in the public, both in the US and of course elsewhere, but especially in the UK, to advocate and study and discuss interstellar matters. My brother Gregory and I, who's well known as a science fiction writer, decided that we would try to encourage that by doing a volume to push that attitude forward. And we called it Starship Century, having a great cover that I produced. And we decided to make it both science and science fiction, and to illustrate several perspectives on interstellar matter, starting with the big, long view with Stephen Hawking, Freeman Dyson, Martin Rees, Peter Schwartz, and Alan Steele, a mixture of both, mostly fact in that case, and also fiction. And then Pathways Toward Starship, that's the second section, which has both science fact and science fiction about how you could build starships and what the implications of building them would be on the builders. Then finally, we had the Starship Era, which talks about what it would be like if we had a functioning society with starships that would explore nearby stars and would the implications it would have on human civilization over the very long term. And finally, a list of interstellar organizations, the artists and writers, and a recommended list of matters about interstellar. And so I recommend the volume to you. It's been remarkably successful. It's sold over $40,000 worth of them. And so there are a lot of them out there. And I recommend you can get both the print version and the hardcover. Rather the print, the hard copy version. I recommend the ebook because the illustrations, there are about 35 colored illustrations. They come over a lot better in ebook format. The whole point was to say, hadn't we better start thinking about getting ready for interstellar and to figure out what does it mean to society to try to do that? And then what would be the implications if we did? And I think it's been pretty successful in doing that. So that's why I've been continuing to be at these meetings and contributed to them since then, because I think it really makes a lot of sense to get ready for it. And in fact, I was swept up then in 2016 in the Starshot project. Starshot, sponsored by Yuri Milner, a billionaire in Silicon Valley, is actually succeeding in doing the R&D to figure out how to send probes to nearby stars in this century at 0.2 of the speed of light. Although I think the initial ones would be more like 5 to 10%. But that is 0.2 of the speed of light is 1,000 times faster than anything has ever been, human-made thing has ever gone. So it's pretty audacious. But we did, as Pete Worden said earlier today, we did make 1,000 to 1 increase in speed in the 20th century. And people don't remark on it much, from horses to space probes. So I think this volume has contributed toward the increasing understanding and appreciation that mankind's moving outward from the Earth. And you can see that in society because there are now films that are set in interstellar situations in the solar system in the future, in the stars. And there are video games. So somehow science fiction has become part of the culture in a way it wasn't when I was a young guy a better part of a century ago. So that's why I'm doing this and will continue to do so as long as I can get up on a stage.
Thanks. And I hope that's for a long time. Thanks, Jim. We appreciate it. We'll go in sequence on the slide there. So Robert, you're up next.
All right. I'm Rob Hampson. I am a biologist by trade and training. I teach at a medical school, work on research, generally involving how do our brains make memory. And I became, I grew up in the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo era. Remember very well my father going out and getting a TV so that we could watch the Apollo 11 moon landing, and inspired by it. I read science fiction most of my life and still read it and still write it now that, or I should say still read it now, even though that I'm writing it. I'm also doing it in my day job. I was inspired by a TV show called The $6 Million Man. And the $6 Million Man is a man who was rebuilt as a bionic man with two artificial legs and an arm, and had all sorts of wonderful capability. And that was what I wanted to do. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I went off to college. I was going to med school. And for any of you young folks that are interested in this, find a point that there's something that inspires you. It's what you really want to do. This is what I really wanted to do. The only problem is I got to college and found out that that field did not exist. And so I started doing something else. I finished my studies, went into research, and again, very interested in how the brain makes, stores, retrieves memory. And about 10 years ago, I was sitting at a conference put together by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And I was watching a gentleman who had a bionic arm attached permanently. He had he'd lost his arm halfway down, and he had a titanium stem attached to the bone, and he could attach an arm, had a cuff around the top. He can wiggle his fingers, he can reach out and grasp, he can shake your hand, he can hold things, he can feed himself, everything with this bionic arm. I looked around and realized that this field that didn't exist, we created. The people in that room had created it. So that's an inspiration that says, don't let go of a dream, find an idea, what you want to do, what inspires you, go out. And if it doesn't exist, make it happen. So that's a lot of what I try to do with the fiction that I write. A lot of the books, a lot of the stories have to do with medical issues. They have to do with memory. They have to do with the brain. But a few years back at one of the predecessor meetings, we asked the question of our audience, what do humans have to become in order to go to the stars? And we talked about it for quite some time. So the book cover that you see there, Stellaris, People of the Stars, is the result of that project, which is to say, what do we need to become? And it's biologically, but it's also sociologically, politically, and other aspects of what does it mean to be human and stay human. So we put that together. Les Johnson, whom you heard from a moment ago, and I put that together. There's also another book out there called The Founder Effect, which kind of continues in that theme, but there we're talking about what type of a mark will the founders of interstellar colonies leave on the future and how will they be remembered. And I like science fiction that inspires us, that paints a future that we want to live in.
That's great. Thank you.
Why don't I borrow a microphone? Pardon me.
There we go.
I suspect I can make myself heard to you all without it, but I'm not sure that that's true for those who are dialed in over Zoom. So I guess the reason that I'm here is because you finally held the conference far enough west that I could drive from Utah. I've been watching it for a while, saying I'd like to go to that. And I'll drive 12 hours for a good conference. I'm not sure I'll drive 30. And I actually didn't come here intending to participate as an author. And I don't think people realized that I was until sort of yesterday. So I do write science fiction. So science fiction, depending on who you are, might mean stories with spaceships and ray guns. Sort of this large audience, I think, perception. Or there's maybe a smaller audience perception that says, no, there's stories that have to be about science in some way. Right, where the story is about a scientific phenomenon or question, and the resolution of the story involves that question. And I've written both kinds. I've got you said, Rob, I like this. It was very self-deprecating. You said there's also a book called The Founder Effect out there, which makes it sound like it just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it did.
Rather than you making it. An example of science fiction that I write, I usually write actually fantasy, various kinds of fantasy. Sometimes maybe you might call it alternate history or different genres of fantasy. I do write some sci-fi. Typically, I'm more interested in sort of questions about culture or human reaction or the human soul around kind of the science. So just by way of very short example, The Founder Effect is an anthology that Rob here put together. Chris and I are both in it. And it's a shared universe. It's about there's a commonly it's not like commonly created, but Rob curated a future history of a interstellar settlement, and everyone wrote stories that fit into that history. And people wrote stories about engineering and about AIs and so on. And I said, I don't really know AIs, but I said you end up with people in these 4 tiny isolated settlements. And I know you're going to have genetic problems if there's small groups of people. And I said, and I also know that my great grandfather kidnapped his bride, and I think that's a potential solution. So I wrote a story of bridal kidnapping in this basically hard science fiction anthology. So I guess that's the kind of thing you should expect from me on this panel.
Legal activities only.
Potentially.
One of the themes you may have picked up is several of our authors here have done a mix of science fact and science fiction. And one of those is Homer Hickam. He was our keynote speaker last night at our banquet. I think a lot of people know he wrote the book Rocket Boys, which became the movie October Sky. He has many other books out, some of which are very scientifically focused and some of which are about alligators. Homer.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen.
Talk to us.
Yeah, that's good. I'm Homer Hickam, and I did write that book, Rocket Boys. Still in print, hardcover print after 22 years. It's my little annuity. And they made that movie October Sky out of it. And but I do have some, I would say, some bona fides as a science fiction writer. When I was working for NASA, my first book was Torpedo Junction, which was about the U-boats during World War II, military history book that did very, very well. And while I was working on that book, by the way, I helped out a young man who was a insurance broker up in Maryland who was also trying to write a book about submarines. His name was, you might have heard of it, Tom Clancy. And I wrote a little bit about that in the new book, Don't Blow Yourself Up. Don't Blow Yourself Up came from the book Rocket Boys, and then the movie October Sky. People in the movie, they just said, well, you know, Homer went off to work for NASA. And but I had so many other people ask me, well, what really happened to you? Did you just go straight and work for NASA? But no, it turned out that I didn't. And I kept putting off this memoir, Don't Blow Yourself Up. I was waiting for more people to die before I wrote about them. And it looks like most of them are going to keep living. So finally, I'm at the point in my life where I did decide to write about what happened afterwards. And that included building a giant cannon, a Civil War style cannon for the school that I went to, Virginia Tech, called the Skipper. If you ever watch Virginia Tech, every once in a while when they score a touchdown, they fire the Skipper. And I came close to blowing myself up on that. And then I went to Vietnam where I actually was blown up. And then I started diving on these deep wrecks, the U-boat wrecks that ultimately led to me writing Torpedo Junction, where I came very close to blowing myself up with an 88 millimeter round on the wrecks. And then continued at NASA, which is a bureaucratic wreck. Of course, and you can blow yourself up in that regard. But I'm getting to where I did write science fiction. When I worked for NASA in the 90s, I was I had a great career with them. I trained the first Japanese astronauts. I worked on the Hubble Space Telescope deployment and the repair mission in the neutral buoyancy simulator, and then started working International Space Station. But I was so totally and utterly frustrated that NASA just refused to even consider going back to the moon. And I just felt like that we needed to get back out of low Earth orbit and let's go somewhere. And they kept, nothing that I could do could really move that needle. So I sat down and wrote this book called Back to the Moon, which was about a renegade crew that hijacks a shuttle and takes it to the moon, which was my mental thinking at that time. I guess we're just going to have to hijack a shuttle and take it to the moon. That didn't get published until Rocket Boys came out. Rocket Boys did so well, Doubleday said, do you have anything else? And I said, well, yes, I do. I opened the bottom drawer of my file cabinet and bam, here's Back to the Moon. And they published it and it did very, very well. And it was fiction. And in a way, hard science fiction. The cool thing about that, for those of you who read Rocket Boys, you know that I talked to Senator John F. Kennedy when he was in West Virginia, running in the West Virginia primary. He asked me, or I asked him what we should do in space, because I was the rocket boy. And he said, I don't know, what do you think we ought to do? And I said, well, I think we should go to the moon and just mine the blame thing. And there were coal miners around there, and they got very enthusiastic about that, needless to say. And he said, well, elect me president, and maybe we will. So throughout the years while I was working for NASA, while the old Apollo guys were shuffling up and down the hall going, oh, Homer, you should have been here during our glory days when we went to the moon. I said, you'd never go anywhere if I hadn't asked Senator Kennedy that question. and so I took responsibility for the Apollo program. Well, who should read Back to the Moon and love it but a young man by the name of Mike Pence? And when Mike Pence got to be vice president, he asked me to be on the advisory group for the National Space Council. And he said, Homer, what do you think that we ought to do in space? And I said, I think we should go up to the moon and just mind the blame thing. So I am presently also taking responsibility, but for the Artemis program as well. So, but we'll see how Artemis turns out. I may decide that I don't want anything to do with that, but we'll see. So far, so good. But I did write that. And then later on, because I am a mining boy from a coal mining town, I wrote the Helium-3 series about what it would be like to live in a mining town on the moon. Crater, Crescent, and Crater True Blood and the Lunar Rescue Company were the young adult novels that I really enjoyed. So I have dipped into the genre.
And it's a fun trilogy. It's worth it, especially with the kids in the room. It's very accessible, worth
Homer, you didn't tell the origin of Don't Blow Yourself Up. Who told you to do that first?
Oh,
You
thank you, Lou. He's right. My mom told me that. Right when I told around the kitchen table with my dad and my brother and my mom, I was going to go build a rocket before I'd ever built one. And her advice to me was, well, don't blow yourself up. And I've got that in the book. It's in the very first pages. It says, don't blow yourself up, Elsie Hickam, my mom. And then below that, it says, didn't I tell you not to blow yourself up? Elsie Hickam, still my mom. Thank you, Lou.
I like that better than the Senator Kennedy stories.
Louis, you're up next. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm Louis Friedman, and I don't write fiction, except maybe my nonfiction is fiction. I've worked all my life in planetary exploration, trying to make planetary missions happen. I worked at JPL on Mariner, Voyager, Galileo, and a number of other missions. And then I co-founded the Planetary Society with Carl Sagan and Bruce Murray, and was his executive director there for 30 years before I retired. Then I started writing books. At JPL, we had a solar sail project. It was an audacious project to try and rendezvous with Halley's Comet. So I got known for being a solar sailor. I always said I wasn't really interested in the technology as much as I am in the missions. And then at the Planetary Society, we had the opportunity through some contacts we had in the Russian space program to do a very low cost mission to build our own solar sail. And we did build a solar sail spacecraft called Cosmos 1, but everything about the spacecraft was good, but the launch vehicle the Russians provided us was no good, and it fell into the Arctic Sea. And then the follow-on to that was Light Sail. The Planetary Society built Light Sail, and I'm proud to say we started that project, and it's still successfully flying today. So solar sail does work, it flies in space, and the only US solar sail is Light Sail. The Japanese have also flown a solar sail, Icaros, and it's so theirs was the first solar sail to fly. Light Sail was the second, and Les Johnson is going to make it official with NASA solar sail, hopefully this year or very soon. In any case, so solar sailing is the pathway to the stars, and that's what's gotten me into the interstellar crowd. And I went to the conference on the 100-year Starship, but I had a different reaction. First of all, I'm very, very honored and impressed to be with so many smart people thinking such creative things. But I was also very discouraged because basically the thinking hadn't changed in 50 years. It was the same wishing for warp drive and antimatter, matter rockets, and fusion will only be just 20 or 30 years from now, and maybe we can do it then. But whenever the numbers were put in, we couldn't do it. And nothing much had changed, and certainly nothing had changed on the technology side that was going to bring us to a starship. And by the same token, human spaceflight also was discouraging in the sense that the technology that gave us Mercury and Gemini and Apollo hadn't been built on at all. We didn't even go as far as, we haven't even been as far as the moon since then. And the technology we're using in the Artemis program is roughly the same. It's capsules, rockets, spacesuits, and so it's been very slow evolution of progress in that area. And it got me discouraged until I began thinking about what's gone on in the robotic space field. There has been just the opposite. We've explored all the planets in the solar system, comets, asteroids, spacecraft are getting smaller, micro miniaturizing them. Artificial intelligence and information processing is changing everything about the way we do things. We can now virtually explore Mars in our living rooms because there's so much data coming back. And soon we're going to be getting, I think, 3D holograms from the planets with the data rates that are getting in this number of spacecraft there. To me, that's where the action is. And that's why I wrote Human Spaceflight from Mars to the Stars. It has a negative conclusion, which I think is a very positive one, which is I want humans to get to Mars. In fact, if we don't do it soon, we may not get there at all because our attention will wander. But if we, but after that, really humans will go no further because exploration will be carried out by all these other technologies, or humans will explore the solar system. They will explore interstellar space. They will explore the exoplanets, but they won't go there. They'll be exploring it with all the data that comes back. To me, that's very exciting. I think it's a very positive one, but I know in the interstellar crowd, it may not be as satisfying as going there. So that's the conundrum and the controversy that I live with.
Thanks, Louis. Appreciate it. Brian.
Hi, my name is Brian McConnell. I'm a software developer. I got started in my career building telecommunications systems, a lot of voice over IP platforms, and nowadays mostly work on translation technology. Oh, sorry about that. So the thing that's interesting to me, I've written about SETI for about 20 years now. My second book is coming out in a few weeks. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And one of the questions that's interesting to me is that SETI's been running for about 60 years now. It's searching for artificial signals, potentially signals that would be information bearing, meaning they're transmitting information that we can interpret. It's a good example of a program that has a very low probability of success in any given year, but if it does detect something, it would be highly disruptive and change society in many unpredictable ways. So much of my writing focuses on, what would happen if we detect something, and then what would the consequences of that be? What kind of information could we expect to receive? Who would be involved in interpreting that, and how would society respond to it? And what's interesting to me about this conference is it's really asking a question: what do we need to do to travel to other solar systems? And SETI is sort of in the same league, except it's about communication versus physically sending hardware somewhere. And so, we're asking a question like, what do we need to prepare for contact? Might not happen for a long time, but we could also wake up tomorrow and be faced with images from another world. And how would we respond to that and interpret it? So that's why I'm here.
All right, Christopher, you're up.
How's that? Good. Hi, my name is Christopher Smith. I am fortunate to be here. Several of my friends have been trying to get me here for years. I've been writing for about 8, and Rob has told me just about every year since that you need to come to TVIW's, now IRG. I was fortunate this year that my dad was able to come with me and his good friend and squadron commander, Jonesy, and they just both finished an astronomy class. So it kind of clicked when they told me that. I said, hey, we got to go. And then we looked at the guest list and said, yeah, we got to go. So here we are. I got started writing, and what I noticed is that, I was just kind of sitting up here thinking about it and taking notes as I'm thinking about the questions. Like my dad introduced me to Star Wars and aliens and adventure stories. Later on, I found Ben Bova's Grand Tour And what I noticed as I'm writing these things down is that these are all character-driven stories. And it occurred to me that when I start writing, I think about what characters and how they react to things. So as I'm sitting here in this conference, I'm hearing all of these great ideas, and my brain is immediately going, yeah, but what if it goes wrong? And that's not to be negative, because the immediate next thought is, and how would the characters that I want to put in this situation handle it? And what other problems can branch off of that? And how would they handle that? So we have our conflict, we have our themes in some cases, and we have our characters solving problems, which, you know, it really helps to hear what all these problems may be and then filter them through. And then as we hear the possible solutions, several times today, I've had conversations with people say, hey, what happens if this happens? And they say, oh, yeah, it's not a problem. This is this. I say, okay, but what if you don't do that? And then now we have a plot, we have a theme, we have a character. So anyway, I don't know what else to say about myself right now. Is that okay?
That'll do for now. That's great.
I have one last thing. Unlike Mr. Hickam, my mom would say, if you blow your legs off, don't come running to me.
Okay. We're going to have an audience Q&A session. So there's a microphone over in the corner. Maybe Cece, if you can grab the mic in the middle and have it available. We are going to be asking folks for some questions. While we're getting set for that, I want to do a lightning round really quick, and we'll start with Jim again at the far end. Most of you who have been here for 2 days, some for 3 days, listening to a lot of discussions. Is there one moment where you went, huh, wow, that's pretty cool, and that you'd like to share with the crowd here? Jim? This is a quick round.
Say again, what?
Is there something you saw in the presentations over the last couple of days that you'd like to share that you
Yeah, I was very impressed by Lou Friedman's talk today, which showed a path forward for really interesting things to do with solar sails. I was very impressed by Dave Messerschmidt's talk about communication, presented in a far simpler form than it's usually presented in. And of course, there was a lot of discussion of SETI, which I think needs to be kind of refurbished these days. So there was a lot of value here. I mean, and we're only in the second day.
All right. Rob.
So our very first speaker was a non-scientist telling us about her experiences with space travel, training to be an astronaut, technology. For the young people in our audience, you will hear two things in public. We need to go into space, and we need to stay home. And one of the arguments of we need to stay home is we shouldn't spoil Mars. We shouldn't spoil the moon. Esther Dyson said, it does not help the universe to leave Mars untouched. We are an explorer species. It is in our very nature to explore. And that's what we should do.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So I like antiquity. I'm interested in the ancient languages and cultures of Earth, and in particular the ones that have left writing, because I think that's represents something kind of like the field notes of the human species, right? People have facing fundamentally the same problems we did in Old Kingdom Egypt or in Babylon. And there were two presentations actually on the idea that one of the things we ought to be doing to try to find extraterrestrial intelligences is looking for their artifacts, for the archaeology, for objects they may have deliberately sent to us or that may have been left behind. Avi Loeb talked about the Galileo project, and I think James Benford was the other, right? So that really resonated. I had not thought about that kind of as an approach, and I find it very interesting.
All right, well, I have to say that I was very intrigued and very interested and a bit taken back when I heard Alan Stern say that he was building a fusion rocket engine. I'm kind of a hardware guy, and I've worked with Alan. As a matter of fact, we worked on a screenplay about Clyde Tombaugh, who found Pluto out there. We didn't agree with the way it turned out, so we have not taken that to a producer yet. But he's a great guy, and when he's determined to do something, he generally does it. All of these presenters that I've been able to see have just they just have expanded my horizons. It's really, really wonderful to be talking about things like SETI, about possible civilizations out there in space. One of my interests since I left NASA is to become an avid amateur paleontologist. And I have a little team. We've been going out for 20 years, and we found so far 5 T-Rexes out of the 40 ever found. And but that has started me thinking about something called deep time. And so when we're out there looking for civilizations, it's not just distance. And we did I heard a lot of talking about distance from the different presenters to get to these star systems, but there's also time. Time may be the biggest barrier. The fact is that these civilizations could have been created, reached their zenith, and then disappeared long before, or maybe long after we are. So it is a barrier. But anyway, I've really, really enjoyed this conference, and all the presenters have been great. And they've all been a little rowdy, this whole crowd, but other than that, it's been great.
Wow, Homer, I didn't think much of Avi Loeb's suggestion about looking for alien artifacts, but now I find you're doing it. You're going out with all these archaeological expeditions and finding things, and I don't know, you sure they're from Earth, the things you're finding? You better look at them more closely.
There is some thought that we might find dinosaur bones on the moon, because the moon and Earth have been exchanging their DNA for millennia because of meteor strikes. So big pieces of the Earth have gone back up to the moon, and who knows, there might be some of our fossils up there.
That's possible, or they both may have come from Mars back when it was warmer and wetter. So lots of possibility. In fact, that's actually the message that I actually haven't changed my view as a result of. I mean, it's really wonderful to hear about all these ideas and anything, but they don't, to me, bring interstellar exploration closer. But there's a poster over there about the probability of finding extraterrestrial life and how we might do it in different places. And I think, and it's kind of the message I'm taking away here. There's lots of exoplanets, lots of life out. I don't know if there's extraterrestrial intelligence out there. I'm pretty skeptical of that, but extraterrestrial life certainly is abundant in the universe, and a lot of planets have it. It just seems that there's a lot waiting to be explored out there, and there's so much to do. And so I'm impressed with all the ideas that we're getting out there and the possibilities we have for finding. It's going to take maybe a century or so, but it's going to end up having the same kind of impact that one of the other panelists talked about, just like the impact of Copernicus finding that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, how it changed everything. When we find life on the other planets, it's not, everything will change.
Thank you. I think what impressed me about this conference is I remember going to conferences like this, 10 or so years ago, and it was a lot of wishful thinking and unobtainium, to be frank. And what impressed me this time is that it's really starting to feel real, that technologies are being developed that even if they're not used in interstellar flight, they will have uses elsewhere. And one that really I noticed was in the discussion around breakthrough starshot, it'll be necessary to build a very large phased array of lasers, to propel the solar sails. Well, that can also potentially be used to deflect asteroids. And it just registered with me. It's like, well, even if we don't launch a single probe, that's a facility that is basically an insurance policy for the entire planet at a cost of probably about $1 per person. So that was my takeaway.
Yeah, we can totally kickstart.
There's been a bunch of great ideas and a lot of things that have just really inspired things for me to write about and look into further. The Heliosity fusion drive is one of them. That's the first one that came to mind. But the one that's kind of stuck with me was and I'm going to get this wrong, but it was the adjustable mass spring drive that we saw yesterday.
The Slinky drive.
The Slinky drive, yeah, which my brain, because I was introduced to Douglas Adams at a young age and corruptible age, immediately turned into the ballistic oscillating inertial non-gravitational drive, or boing. So I have actual drawings of a ship using the boing drive that I've been playing with all weekend and just kind of chuckling to myself.
And I'll finish up, and then it's time for audience questions. If you want to start heading for the microphone, there it is. Somebody's got a microphone. I've been going to space conferences for 40 years. And a lot of the ones that I went to for a long time, and some of the people here in the audience were there with me, were talking about cheap access to space for cheap space launch. And the first years were, talking about unobtainium and wishful thinking and, oh, wouldn't it be nice if somebody gave me $1 billion? None of which was reasonable. And as I went to the same conferences with the same topics year over year, it graduated to the point where people were no longer, putting up wishful thinking. They were showing photographs and then later videos of operating rocket engines that solved the problems. And now we have SpaceX. And so, over a 40-year period, that problem went from, impossible to routine. I've been coming to TVIW for, I think I came to the second one, so that was 9 years ago. TVIW was the old name of Interstellar Research Group, for those we keep using that acronym. I've been coming to this for probably a decade. And yeah, it has changed from, wouldn't it be nice if we had warp drive? Wouldn't it be nice if we could produce antimatter? Wouldn't it be nice if we had all the good stuff they have in Star Trek? To this weekend, we're seeing videos of operating equipment that could solve some of these problems. And we're seeing proposals which could be funded for hundreds of thousands to small number of millions of dollars, which, yeah, in your budget and my budget, that's a lot of money. But in the industrial sense, those are tiny amounts of money where we can actually spend a little bit of money and get real hardware. And maybe we're not going to send it off to Alpha Centauri on the first blast, but if we could start, putting orbiters around Neptune in 1 year rather than 20 years, that's amazing. And that hardware was being discussed this weekend. So this is an incredibly exciting time, especially for the younger folks in the audience. You're going to see this stuff in your lifetimes. And if you take all the math classes you can work on this stuff in your lifetimes. So that's something fun. With that, I think you're the first question. Hit it.
My name's Bill, and I'm going to exert poster authors.
There we go.
Privilege.
Mhm.
And if you didn't see our poster and my poster, we drew attention to the fact we've got this major stream of comets coming into the sun grazers or sun divers.
I really am going to try to get you into a question for the panel, not a speech, but go ahead.
Fair enough. Okay. So is this, is this something that strikes you as technology capable, or is it just a curiosity? Do any of you know what I'm talking? I was going to try to describe a little bit about what it is, and I'm drawing a blank. So it's this idea that these comets are coming in a constant stream from a singular direction, and there's several different groups of them, and it appears that they're highly focused, and the energy required to operate them, according to Second Nina, in a paper we got from NASA, from JPL, is that it's a non-gravitational energy that's being supplied here. So that's my question. Does this look like a curiosity or something that needs to be explored at greater length?
I think it's a great trigger for science fiction stories.
Okay.
I think you could write cool stories about this. As somebody throwing comments at us.
Easy answer is it should be explored.
Thank you.
That's right. Who's next? I want you to head back that way to the young folks. I want to hear what they have to say. All of y'all
On
are
a serious note about that question, though, let me just add that's the kind of thing that is a much more natural explanation than for Oumuamua that Avi Loeb was trying to suggest was an alien visitor. It's much more likely that it is could be an interstellar object that has been broken up by close interaction with the sun or tidal friction or broken apart in a binary asteroid. They get sent on interstellar things. They could be subject to internal heating, which has non-gravitational forces. A lot of natural explanations are possible in that. So that's why I say the simple answer is it should be explored.
Now, from a science fiction point of view, we have movies, Armageddon, Deep Impact, a few other types of, okay, there's this great big comet coming toward Earth or large object, and it's going to crash in, and we're going to use every resource we can to break it up so it doesn't destroy our world. And after we have used every resource we have in order to deflect this incoming body, what do we do when we find out it's only the first of a whole series and they're coming one after another, after another, after another? There's your science fiction treatment of this concept of what can we do with it? How would we approach that? We've just thrown everything we've got at number one. And here's number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sitting out there, and they're coming in the next few years. Yeah, fun concept.
Good story. While we're waiting for the next question, I'll tell a story. At a previous one of these conferences, I sat with Jerry Purnell at dinner, who's a science fiction author, sadly now passed away. And he was looking at that exact, not the series, but the question of, okay, we see one coming, and we've got, I think his model was like 10 years, and it's a planet killer, like at the dinosaurs. And what are we going to do about it? And of course, the UN panics, and we, and at that time Russia, and now China are all arguing with whatever. And the ultimate solution was to give a no-bid contract for $1 trillion to Halliburton. And they would make it happen.
Well, I wonder, if this really did happen, how much of our population would say, well, it's meant to happen and therefore we shouldn't stop it? It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. We've got the Triassic, Jurassic, and the Cretaceous eras were all caused. We had mass extinctions caused by outside influences that cause these things to happen. And so every 100 million years or so, it looks like we're supposed to have a big mass extinction brought in from the outside. Maybe that's what we're supposed to have. Maybe that's the way the universe is supposed to unfold. I'm just putting this out there and kind of begging the question, though, that perhaps there might be a percentage of people who would say we shouldn't try to deflect it. Let's let it happen because it's supposed to happen. And so that would be an interesting conflict, I think, on Earth while we decided what we were going to do.
It would be a controversy.
I'm waiting for the religiousness to get a hold of this one. Okay. So we have, so far I've just written down a few. Church of the Galactic Nolan Ryan, Interdimensional Cricket Bowler, Holy Order of the 90 million mile an hour fastball, and the Holy Order of the Omnipotent Pitching Machine.
Quick question in front.
That kind of leads right into my question. Of the presentations you've heard here this weekend so far for the science fiction authors, which ones have inspired you with ideas for new stories, new plots?
We'll go this way. Christopher's hopping up and down to
Sorry,
answer
which
this.
ones haven't? Here's everything that I've written down: story ideas, plots, themes, characters, you name it, and situations over the last 2 days. And most of these are front and back, and they're not all jokes. So just dang near everything. Very little hasn't.
I'm working on a project right now, working on a story where I need a very fast, energetic drive to get something from Earth orbit to Mars orbit in 6 days, 6 to 7 days. We would need 10 minutes of 6G acceleration, 6 times gravity. We would need about 10 hours of 2 times of gravity acceleration just to get it up to the right speed. We could get there in 7 days. I actually saw something here today that has the potential to give that kind of speed, and that's the helicity drive. It's a plasma fusion, and this is this whole realm that we've been talking about. Things Jim mentioned to me, so I'm going to say this on his behalf. It's amazing how many things were discredited 20 years ago that are come back again. And so, but we look at these other things, as Stephen has said, it was a dream 10 years ago, and now we're talking the nuts and bolts of how to make these things happen. And so this is one, it inspired me quite a bit.
And that's actually something that I'd like to follow in for our next question. And actually, Charlie, is Tony still online? I'm going to give Tony a heads up. I may want to throw the mic back to her if she's here. This is a conference developing technologies for interstellar travel. That's really hard, okay? And a lot of the messages over the last couple of days have been that's really hard. We don't think it's impossible or we wouldn't be here. But the steps we're going to take to develop interstellar travel will give us the solar system. And being able to travel between planets in this solar system will be routine. And some of the kids in the back row, if you want to go to Neptune, you'll be able to go to Neptune. And this is not a lifetime commitment. It's okay, maybe it's a year or 2 year round trip. Well, guess what? Exploring the South Pacific used to be 2 and 3 year round trips, and we did that. And the ships weren't nearly as comfortable as the ones that we're going to build. So there are capabilities where we will spread out to fill the solar system. Charlie, did we find out if Tony is here? Yeah, Tony, you had a book about this a while back, Tales from the Sol System. I don't know if you want to chime in. I'm springing this on you with no warning, but a lot of these stories that need to be told, a lot of those are going to just take place inside this solar system, and those can take place, within one person's career, within one person's lifetime, without being, a one-way trip to another star that may or may not be friendly. Have you thought any more about Tales of the Sol System since then?
Well, there was one of my pet projects, and I loved it. I had a Greg Benford story in it. In fact, he was the first person that I contacted when I had the idea for the anthology. I think science fiction's job, one of science fiction's jobs, is to inspire scientists and technologists and politicians to play in this realm and to make it emotionally clear why it is that going to the stars is a thing that humans should do. So I'm very excited to hear that all of my authors are excited, and I can't wait to see Chris's story, and I'm sure there will be the inevitable anthology. I've already asked Stephen for contact information so I can get nonfiction from Homer and Lewis and Brian as well. So yeah, I mean, the fact that we're getting to do this, right? The fact that we are going from, gee, wouldn't it be nice to, hey, we can actually do this, is amazing to me. And to be able to share that enthusiasm and to make it real for the people in the back row there, that's part of what science fiction is supposed to do. That's what part of my job as a science fiction publisher is supposed to be able to help make that happen. Oh, and we should mention the scholarships that we sponsor as well through the Interstellar Research Group to, again, put money on that and say, yes, we do bet this way. We think this is going to happen.
Very good.
If I could say something about just writing in general, science fiction and fiction. Plots are very, very important. There's no question that you want to have an interesting plot. And people are always bringing me plots. Oh, I've got the best idea for a book, blah, blah. Ultimately, though, what I've found in writing is that what people are really interested in is other people. And so we have to remember as writers, even though we have wonderful plot ideas and that's just going to take the world by storm, if you don't people your book with interesting characters that make you want to turn the page to see what's happening to these characters and care about these characters, then nobody's going to read the book. So I always try to remember that. And of course, we have a perfect example in Star Trek. The only reason we watch Star Trek is because of the people in it, and we remember them, and we wonder about what's going to happen to them. So as writers, we need to keep that in mind.
I really like Tony's comment about, the role of science fiction being to inspire people to think about these, this possible destination of the human race. And so this is my first time at this conference, but I think it's been very striking to me to what extent science fiction writers are present and invited to participate in the conversation. And I think it's not just the science fiction writers who are here to participate in the sort of inspirational process or the dream making, if you will. We've seen, by the time we're done, we'll have seen something like 30 odd presentations, Stephen, something like that. 38. There's no way we're going to get 38 working drive new technologies validated approach. It's not going to happen, right? That's not how science works. Maybe some, maybe none, right? Maybe none. So the sharing of all these papers is an act of mutual inspiration and collective dreaming. And so I have loved it. I'm excited to come back next year.
Question here in front, been patient. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah. So I was, you kind of talked a lot about like big discoveries like in the future, and I was wondering what like you think people's reactions would be, and like if these like hypothetical discoveries are like they're not gradual, they're not over the years, like what people's what people's reactions to them would be, and if they would be the same as what we've seen in the past, because like we've come far away from Galileo being stuck on house arrest for the rest of his life.
Not so sure. Avi Loeb actually had an interesting comment this morning that, Galileo was put under house arrest by the church. Today, he would simply be canceled on social media, which is what has happened to Dr. Loeb in the last 9 months. People are still people. I should let the panel answer, but my reaction to that is people are still people, and I'm not sure how much we've changed since the times of Galileo.
This is a very interesting question. It's something I've thought about quite a bit. In the SETI community, there's often an assumption that contact or detection of a signal from another civilization would be across the board a positive thing. That we would learn from them, that humanity would unite. And I used to, be somewhat optimistic as well, but the experience with COVID has really kind of changed my mind on that. And I think that in the case of a detection event, for example, there'd be a big risk that you'd have a large population of people who would just go off the rails. They would just be following, some, cult leader or charlatan would emerge, develop a large following. Probably 30% of the population would just only listen to that person, wouldn't listen to the scientists at all. Other people might listen to the scientists, and that would be a positive thing. But I think our reaction to that kind of discovery could be quite divided.
I will follow up mentioning something that David Brent told us on Friday night. I'm not sure how many people on the panel were here for that. David Brent is he's a scientist first. He's a science fiction author. He's a futurist. He's a lot of things, and a great speaker. He's involved in a project called TASAT, TASAT, and I believe it's tasat.org is the website. And TASAT stands for There's a Story About That. And the idea is the science fiction community has put so many collective hours of really high IQ brain power into interesting scenarios, like what happens if we can make human clones? What happens if we can make autonomous killer flying drones? What happens if, we have laser weapons? And some of these things are now less science fiction-y and more science-y, as Brent can attest to in the unclassified parts of his brain. And one of the things that Brent is involved in is trying to catalog who has written stories about this in the last 30, 40, 50 years in the science fiction world, as ways of helping to get our politicians educated on what the impact might be. Because let's face it, a senator is not going to read a policy paper. His staff's going to read it, but they might read a story. And I did this a zillion years ago because Sam Nunn was a senator, and that's been a while. And I photocopied illegally on my school Xerox machine Arthur C. Clarke's story Superiority, which was a story about building new military technologies with very, very advanced technology that didn't quite work right, and how in this case it was a planet that did that was completely overwhelmed by a much more primitive planet that just built lots and lots and lots of simple stuff that worked. And I got a very nice response back from Sam Nunn saying, that was a very thought-provoking story, and I think that was more effective than a policy paper would have been. So people, back to characters, people like stories. And I think that some of the stories we've created in science fiction can actually have a real world impact.
So let me both agree with you and disagree in a way. I think you're quite right about the COVID lessons has taught us something, but it's not very different. What was the impact of the discovery of evolution? Enormous. It changed everything about the way we do our science and biology and learned a lot. It's influenced everything. But at the same time, 30% of the people probably have a view, and we've had to cope with the anti-science view on that in very much the same way we're doing now and see in a lot of other aspects of it. So I think the discovery of life on another world will be as profound as the discovery of evolution or the discovery of the heliocentric universe. But at the same time, there will be those people who try to put other people in prison or develop other theories on that, and the comment that people will be people that dealing with it will be dealing with it in both ways.
I don't know where the mic went. We have another question? Here you go.
Where do you draw the line between fantasy and science fiction?
Which publisher pays for it?
Fantasy and science fiction. Well, there's a lot of different types of science fiction, and probably folks on this panel are more familiar with all of them, but they run up and down the line from almost fantasy all the way to really, really hard science fiction, where if it isn't actually technologically possible at this very moment, then you can't write about it. So there's a lot of gradations in that. I know on a personal level, I've always been more of a hard sci-fi guy. When I grew up, I didn't like to read books about wizards that could just simply wave their wand and make things happen. That was before I read Tolkien, by the way. I changed my mind after that a little bit. But I liked it where it was really just you were extrapolating what you knew and what would be possible in the future. And I read a lot of Jules Verne at that time, and then I got into Heinlein and speaking of really hard sci-fi and so on. And for me, that just really intrigued the way my mind worked, and made me want to think about what it would be like to live on the moon or live in Mars or be on a spaceship and so on, as versus fantasy, which, I think sometimes fantasy writers take the easy way out. They wave the wand and things happen and it's wonderful. That's an easy out. But I have to say that I would definitely be disagreed with by the fantasy writers that we have here on this panel for that. And because they do make, and I'm not a big fantasy reader, and I know that it has really in the literary world has been a very, very important segment of it. So we can kind of get maybe a little controversy started here.
If a writer writes what looks like a science fiction story, but he knows that the science is false and there will never be anything close to it, is he writing fantasy or is he writing science fiction?
So I'm not sure these questions really matter in the sense that genre is a bookseller's problem. And the reason to worry about it is, especially historically in a physical bookstore, you have to figure out what shelf do I put this on? Does it go next to Isaac Asimov or does it go next to J.R.R. Tolkien? And so, I mean, I think that, you write a book, you try to grapple with ideas, even if you're writing a lowly genre like fantasy. And
I didn't say it was lowly.
And you try to grapple with serious, meaningful ideas about the human condition. Now, there's a third option here, right? Of course, if we think about genre from a bookseller's point of view, I had a conversation with my friend Brad Torgerson recently. We were talking about sort of this stuff. And I said, look, Brad, it's easy. If it's science fiction that anyone actually likes, it's not science fiction, it's space opera. Okay, if people are, shooting each other with ray guns, if they're using laser swords, if they're dog fighting in their spaceship, that's space opera. The hard, and I know this, I'm like in the land of hard science fiction here, and some of you are going, no, Dave. But true hard science fiction, where really what's at issue is the science problem, is not a big appeal story usually, right? What people science fiction that sells a lot is mostly a kind of fantasy. It's dressed up as science because there are spaceships, but you're not, Jedi or Battlestar Galactica. No one's asking questions about the science of the Cylons, right?
Well, it does get back to what people are really interested in as other people, even when they're elves, right? And so if you can make them interesting, my only thing is that as all these writers know, you're writing along, and you know that you're on the plot that you're writing, that you ultimately are going to run into a wall, and you're going to have to solve this problem that you have given your character, and you have no clue how to solve it. And I just wished so often when I was writing that I'd had Gandalf to come in and wave his wand, and that would solve. That's my only that's my only criticism of
Homer, I don't want to fight you.
Okay, all right, let's make it happen.
Look, it's all what if literature, but about different aspects of the human condition, and what if fantasy is the what if literature of human spirituality, whereas science fiction is what if literature about human society and technology. But I will retract everything I've said if Tony feels differently, because she's now looks queued up to make a comment here.
Tony writes his checks.
Well, you're too big to fight, DJ. I'm not going to fight you. So.
I was going to say, Tony buys science fiction. She doesn't buy fantasy.
Tony publishes both.
And I know.
Go ahead.
I do publish both. Then I publish space opera too. I love all of it. But I think I may have an answer to the question. And where is it? Let's see. What did I do with it? It was so brilliant when I wrote it down. Here we go. If science fiction is about learning how to control the universe from nanotech level all the way up to gravity and deep time, perhaps fantasy is about coming to terms with not being able to control the universe.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Damn, that's really good.
That's interesting. Nice? Yeah.
Where's that from? Cool.
Oh, nice.
You should write that. You should write that down somewhere, Tony.
It's part of a speech I'm going to be giving later. Yes.
Very good. Microphone. More questions. You're up again.
Mr. Hickman, you said you've done. Oh, I'm sorry, Hickam. I'm so sorry.
I'm used to it.
You said you'd done some paleontology work, and I was wondering where you'd done that at.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I didn't hear.
I'll try to repeat it for her. She's asking about your paleontology work, where you've been and what you've done there.
Oh, well, that happened. The director of October Sky, Joe Johnston, also directed a little movie called Jurassic Park 3. And in the process of him looking for locations, he met Dr. John Jack Horner of Montana State, a Museum of the Rockies. And Horner is the fellow that probably knows more about dinosaurs than anybody. And so Joe showed me a cigar box he had of bone fragments from the Cretaceous, which is the time frame of a T-Rex, and almost all the dinosaurs you see in Jurassic Park are actually Cretaceous dinosaurs, by the way. But Jurassic sounds better. I'll get
Cretaceous Park just doesn't have a ring to it. So.
Exactly, Cretaceous Park is like, what's that? Anyway, so I got to meet Dr. Horner because of that. He's a very secretive guy, and he didn't allow very many people to go to where he is finding and digging these dinosaurs up. It's mostly out in eastern Montana, the Hell Creek Formation. It's where the first T-Rexes were found by a fellow by the name of Barnum Brown. And I went out with him, and it turned out that I was pretty good at finding dinosaur bones. I'm a West Virginia boy, and I know the difference between a rock and a bone. And I can also climb hills that most people wouldn't consider climbing. So I really got interested in it, intrigued in it, and started going out. And for 20 years, I've been going out around Garfield County in eastern Montana and working mostly on federal land. So all the bones that I find go to either Museum of Rockies or University of Washington. But it's been fascinating as somebody that's been interested, of course, in space, but also now time. And again, I was talking about looking at deep time. You can sit on a plateau in eastern Montana and look across the valley where all these dinosaur fossils are found, and you can actually see time because it's eroded down to that. So you see these hills with all these different layers. And after a while, you know what layer that you're looking at and where the iridium level is, below which you find dinosaurs and above which you don't find dinosaurs. And by the way, to put it in context with what we're talking about here, the Inspiration 4 crew that just went up, you know about them? The 4 so-called civilian, I call them amateur astronauts that just went around for 3 days. I got to meet them, and I wanted to give them something that I felt was really, really lucky for them, and also rarer than moon rocks. So I gave them, each of them, a bag of T-Rex poop. It's called coprolite. So I don't know if they carried it into orbit, but if they did, that would have been unique.
That's hard to top. I don't see the mic. Any more questions? It's 7:20. We do want to get our booksellers out of here by 8 o'clock, so I'll point to them, and then we'll finish with the panel. The University of Arizona Bookstore has brought a number of books by a number of the people on the panel. They're available for sale. We would appreciate you buying some. And the panelists who have books back there, I'm sure would mostly be happy to sign them for you. So we can do that in the back. So it's we modeled this after Disney. You exit through the gift shop. So please take a look at those on. Or Cracker Barrel, you enter through the gift shop. They make you wait, so you buy stuff while waiting. So anyhow, I want to thank our panelists. Any last words? Again, lightning round or anything very quick people want to add? Feel free.
Thank you.
All right. This has been fun. Those of you who are not part of this conference, thank you for participating. Oh, is that a question? Run the mic to the back, please.
So this is good evening, by the way. This is a question really for Homer. How has your work inspired you as an engineer to for your writing? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
I think you said, how did your work as an engineer inspire your writing? That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm glad it worked out the way that it did. And I think everybody on this panel would have a different story, because I think most of us here have a technological background, and it has led to being able to write as well. I would have to say that if Sputnik had not happened, I was much more interested in reading and writing. I would have probably become an English professor at some Midwestern university. But because Sputnik happened, that got me really, really intrigued about space. And then that's why I became an engineer. The thing about being an engineer for an outfit like NASA is that you really, really meet some interesting and intriguing people who are characters. And actually in this whole profession, this whole business of aerospace, there are just a lot of interesting people. And again, what I like to write, when I write, it's really about people with a certain background that I also weave into the story. So working with the people at NASA has given me some great characters to work with and to write about that I would not have had if my original inclinations had led me to be an English professor somewhere.
Right, so the authors that are here will be happy to sign books that you buy. We do have books also by authors that aren't here. For some of them had to leave the conference early, or Chris Impey is actually in DC, but his book is back here. He's University of Arizona. If you would like signatures, we can make that happen. And if there's other books that aren't here by authors that aren't on the shelves back there, Amazon's ready when you are, and so is Antigone Books, which is our local bookstore here in Tucson. With that, unless there's last minute comments, I'm going to dismiss the panel. Please come chat, get signatures, get books signed, pay for books. Always pay for books. It's a good thing. They give you money randomly. Thanks for being here. This is part of the purpose of the Interstellar Research Group is outreach to the general public and to let the public know that this is something that can happen in our lifetimes. It's not just pretty pictures. It's not just fantasy or science fiction. It's actually real, and we're trying to spread that word. So with that, thanks very much. We appreciate your being here.
Yeah, a friend of mine works for a county in Salt Lake a couple of years ago. Hickam, don't fall off the platform. Yeah. Well, yeah, at least have it on video.
Chris, you were so quiet for most of the panel.
There were other people saying things that I was going to say. It's like, oh, that's the problem you do in sequence. That's why I let you go first last time. You go in sequence.
It's okay. I know that problem very well. No. Yeah, look how many story ideas I have. That was pretty good.
They will, just in case.